On to business now. For a little help with that, let's bring in Executive Vice President of the Commonwealth Foundation and Fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, Jennifer Stefano, and America's Accountant, Professor Dan Geltrude. Good morning.
Good morning, Alison. How are you?
We're great. We're great. We're trying to stay warm here in the north. Let's start with the markets. Overall, we had a fairly flat this week, with the Dow dropping just over 200 points yesterday and the S&P and NASDAQ barely making it into the green yesterday. Dan, we didn't see a lot of movement the past 5 days. What are investors thinking?
I think investors are trying to figure out what's going to happen next, particularly as it pertains to the promise of higher interest rates. Now, what that leaves investors with is to decide about risk tolerance. Do they move to bonds or fixed income type investments where they can lock in as opposed to at a higher interest rate, as opposed to staying in the market and withstanding those risks when the market generally will dip as interest rates go up? So I think there's a lot of evaluation going on right now with investors.
Yeah, the average price of a new car revving up this week to $47,000. It's astronomical. Jennifer, is there more going on here than just a supply chain crisis? Because the numbers are just through the roof.
Yes, I think, look, the larger companies that were able to initially absorb some of the cost and the inflation from supply chain issues and COVID disruptions have now come to realize that they can no longer do that. It now has to start to get baked into the prices. I think if you remember in the spring, new car prices went up to $40,000. And we were all grasping our hearts then. That looks quaint, that looks cheap compared to where it is today. And that's not really that far out in the future. I think what we're going to see is as these larger companies realize they can no longer absorb these costs, they're going to get passed down to the consumer, and it's going to eat up more of the consumer's disposable income. At the same time, President Biden wants to increase taxes. It's going to be very problematic for working families.
Dan, what are your thoughts on this?
As far as what's happening with cars, new cars, it's about scarcity, right, Tom? Because really, if the demand is there, people want their cars, the cars aren't available. What does that relate to? Well, it's driven a lot by this microchip shortage. The car may be ready to go. However, without the chip, it's incomplete, and therefore they have to hold it back. So this goes back to the overarching crisis, which is the shortage of labor. Not enough people to make the microchips, and it starts from there.
Makes sense. Staying on the road, gas prices, they're projected to reach almost $4 in the next future. Dan, do we see them turning around anytime soon?
I really don't. I think everything that we're seeing directionally related to inflation is all heading in the same direction. It's a steady increase. And as far as when you have rising fuel costs, that triggers everything else to get more expensive. Why? Because goods are always traveling from point A to point B. What makes that happen? Fuel.
Yeah. Jennifer, any advice? Everyday Americans, a lot of parents are out there, they're bringing their kids back and forth, to sports and activities, and it adds up.
It does add up, and that is a place where American voters really start to feel the pain. And what I have found in a lot of my polling is that for the average American voter, they can understand that things go poorly at times, that things get bad, for instance, like COVID. But what they cannot tolerate from elected officials and from their leaders is that they are making things worse. And I think as gas prices continue to go up, and because the pipeline was shut down by President Biden, there's no outlet, even though the administration has begged OPEC to increase production. Inflation continues to go up. Food continues to go up. People are going to feel, and polling is showing, that they feel this administration, that their elected officials are making things worse and that they don't have ways to fix it. Yeah. And when the American public feels powerless, that usually spells trouble for people in power.
That's one of the reasons why this Green New Deal is so dangerous. Yeah. And like what Dan said, everything is connected to energy prices, to fuel prices. You attack the energy industry, it increases everything, the cost of everything. Real quick, last question for you guys. Shaquille O'Neal, he's selling his stake in the Sacramento Kings because he's looking to invest in mobile sports betting. Dan, this is exploding all over the place. You think this is a good move for him?
Well, it's hard to say. Obviously, he believes it is. Look, it's coveted owning part of a professional franchise. particularly in basketball, where Shaquille O'Neal made his name. So if he's willing to give that up, Tom, I mean, it must be a pretty lucrative outlook for him.
Yeah.
And I like what they're talking about him doing is creating the ShaqPot. So, I mean, maybe that's a new endeavor for him that's really going to make him even more famous.
I love it. Okay, so with the cost of everything, Girl Scout cookies, they're going up $1. And look, I think the good thing here is that you can now DoorDash them to your house. Jennifer, I know you're a mom. I rely on DoorDash, Uber Eats, anything that could save me time. You think this is a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm confident that I'm funding the CEO's private jet at DoorDash. It's just, you need it some days. And yeah, I think as an American, like I'll always pay more money for sugar to be delivered to my house in a fast fashion. So good for the Girl Scouts. It's a good business move. I'm a Boy Scout mom too, so I support them, and they're selling popcorn. And I also think it can keep the kids safe, but still lets them be entrepreneurial and understand the art of selling. But also get out there at the supermarkets and make sure you're standing out there to sell them as well, because that one-on-one engagement, geez, even behind a mask,
absolutely,
it still matters for our kids.
Yeah,
you know.
Agree. All right, Jennifer Stefano, Dan Geltrude. We'll see you in the next hour. Thanks so much, and we will be.